opinions of the commentator or commentators are solely those of the commentators and not of CJAD 800 or Astro.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
8:07 on CJAD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Welcome back for a new season, Josh.
Great to be here. 2011, going to be a fantastic year.
And our guests this evening are two owners of Domino's franchises, Rob Lakornik and Jesse Goodwin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
You know, Dan, as we kick off the 2011 year, and with Super Bowl coming up just around the corner, you know, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about ordering pizza. We're thinking about kicking back in front of the TV, notwithstanding all that we ate during the long ago holidays that we've already exercised over. So we figure, you know, it's a great way. We have a couple of really interesting guys that have been friends for a really long time. And now we get a little inside look about running a Domino's franchise or two.
Rob and Jesse look like they're dreading Super Bowl Sunday already.
Well, we're used to it. We've been doing it for years.
Is it as crazy as one would imagine on that day?
It could be. It depends on the teams that are playing, but we've had some pretty wild Super Bowls.
Yeah, it's usually one of the busiest days of the year, like Halloween and also July 1st, moving day.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, Rob and Jesse, I believe you have two franchises that you run today. So kind of tell us where you are today and bring us back to the beginning. And you might each of you have slightly different beginnings, but then bring us back to the beginning and let us know how you got into the franchise of Domino's.
Well, I first started off as a driver at Domino's Pizza. My brother was working there part-time through university, and he thought it was a really fun job, flexible hours, and he was earning good money. So I tried my hand at it, and I really enjoyed it.
For myself, I started in 1988 as a driver. Worked my way through the system and became an assistant manager in the early 90s. And from there, we met at Domino's.
And did you went from assistant manager and you said, you know what, hey, it seems like a good business and I want to kind of put the dollars in my own pocket. So that's where you went with the franchise? Like, where was that moment where it kind of just clicked in your head and said, hey, got to go do this now?
Well, when I was working as a driver, I became assistant manager in 1995, 1996, and I really enjoyed how this system worked. I mean, myself, I really love customers. I love serving the customers, and I thought it'd be amazing to be able to do that for myself. And that's kind of where it got started. I mean, I love also the way that this system, the Domino's system, set up. So I thought that'd be a great opportunity.
And Rob, was it a similar experience for you?
It was. I like the challenge of working in the store and the scheduling and controlling of the costs and that part of the business as well as the service, providing good service.
So you have this thought, you're going to open a franchise, excuse me. What do you do first? Like, what are your first few steps in venturing into this that you, I guess, are really not 100% sure of what you're going into?
Well, one of the first things, of course, is we need financing, and we have to do some research into which location, which area we're going to open up in. And so that was a big obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, we researched the area. We looked into population, types of income for the area. We found an area that we liked, which was in Verdun. Our first location is in Verdun.
Did you ever consider perhaps opening up your own independent shop versus going with the franchise? And what made you go with one instead of the other?
Well, one of the reasons why we went with Domino's is just because we were both working in it. We both love the setup of Domino's Pizza. I mean, it's very customer service oriented and very efficient in terms of all the equipment being very close by and making sure that the customer has a fast pizza delivery. So we both enjoyed it, and as I said, we both liked the support system that it had. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to go with that.
When a lot of businesses set up, they always talk about real estate and location. Rob, you alluded to it before. How did you choose that location? How much was Domino's, the key franchisor, implicated in that? Can you explain the process a little bit?
Well, they leave that up to you to research the area and find the location. And once you find a spot that you find will help you succeed, they come in and they approve it and tell you whether or not it's suitable for your needs.
So you guys just kind of drive around the areas and look for places, or you're kind of I don't know how much online information there was at the time in the mid-late 90s, but so how did you go about choosing that specific location?
Well, we drove around the locations. We did actually physically do that. We looked in newspapers as well, and we met with landlords, and the rest from there is pretty much history. We found something we liked.
Did you mentioned financing before? You're starting up. I mean, you guys were either assistant manager or working in Domino's, and you walk into a bank and you try and get a loan. Was that difficult as a first-time entrepreneur starting your own business?
Yes, it was very difficult, actually. A lot of the banks at that time, even today, didn't want to finance restaurants because they thought it was a very high-risk venture. But eventually we hit on a bank that was willing to finance us. So we were very lucky and happy about that.
Is there something that you would have proven to them differently today, knowing the bit of the business and the background? Like, how would you approach a bank today? And like, if you're looking at a franchisee saying, hey, you're going to go open up a bank, this is what you need to go tell them.
Well, basically, we have to provide a business plan, obviously, and we have to make sure. I mean, right now we have a couple locations, so it's already kind of self-supported. But we just have to make sure that we know what we're doing, and they have to make sure that we're confident.
How involved is, and I'm trying to get in the mind of a franchisee, how involved does the franchisor get into the business? I think as you're running a business and you have this kind of, not big brother, but this large organization sitting over you and giving you some guidelines, that's got to impact in the entrepreneur that has the entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to take his own his own path and his own desires and deal with the product and customers and all that. And I think that I'm really curious to know where in the mindset that kind of came in, and certainly in your first few months of operations. As far as was Domino's there? Were they assisting? They have their consultant. They kind of give you certain guidelines. How involved and implicated were they?
No, they're very involved and very implicated in helping us out. I mean, helping us, as Rob was saying before, making sure that we had the proper location, and also providing us with marketing materials to make sure that we advertise properly to our customers, and helping us build the store and the proper procedures and standards that had to be administered. Was it a success from the get-go?
It was a difficult run at the beginning. We had some tough times at the beginning. There's long hours involved, and a lot of hard work, a lot of promoting the product and promoting our service. In fact, when we started, we initially had what's called a mock rush, where we went out to customers door to door and told them that a certain day you can order pizza, and it's going to be completely free of charge. We just want to practice to get our staff used to providing a good product and service. And that wowed a lot of the customers, and they're quite impressed, and that helped us build our clientele to start with.
Rob Lakornik and Jesse Goodwin are owners of two Domino's franchises. They are the guests this evening on today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau. More with them in just a second. 514-790-0991. It's 8:15 right now.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Josh Miller with us as he is always, Monday nights from 8 p.m. now for the next couple of months. And our guests this evening, Rob Lakornik and Jesse Goodwin. They are owners of two Domino's franchises. And coming up in a bit, we'll also talk to Micheline Mayette of Fuller Landau about human resources issues. So do stay tuned for that. But first, we continue with Rob and Jesse.
So, Rob, you left off last with customer service, and this was an important factor when you're dealing with franchises, you're dealing with customers on a daily basis, you're dealing with a food product, which is very important. Tell us a little bit about how you approached, either one of you, approached customer service and the excellence that you strive for.
Oh, well, I make sure that customer service is one of the most important aspects of Domino's Pizza, any Domino's Pizza. I think it's really important. Any business can thrive on having great customer service and make sure that customers are wowed and satisfied every step of the way. as everyone knows, customer service is really, really important in the fast food industry, even across the board. So we have different ways to make sure that our customers are treated the way they should be, the way they deserve to be. And that's one way is training our people to make sure they respond to the customer's needs. And another way, of course, is to make sure that the product is always perfect and optimal. And that's another important aspect. And you just have to leave it up to people to show initiative to make sure that the customers are going to be treated properly. It's how you convey the message to our people to make sure that everything's taken care of properly.
Do you get firsthand feedback? I mean, what do you do to follow up with customers and just to make sure that it is a constant product that you're delivering?
Well, we do customer callbacks, which means that after, let's say, a customer has ordered a pizza at nighttime, we'll call back the customer and ask how the service was, how was the product, how long did it take for their order to be delivered to their door. So there's sort of random checks, which are very thorough and also very important, and provide important feedback to to our store staff.
And is there, I mean, I'm sure you have plenty of satisfied customers. Do you get compliments? Do you get dissatisfactions? How do you deal with that? And are you training your people properly? Is it difficult to impart?
Well, it depends on the individual. Some people are obviously easier to train to make sure the customer's satisfied all the time. But overall, it's pretty good. I mean, our staff is trained to know that they have to treat the customer a certain way. We get customer compliments most of the time. Sometimes, in fact, actually, Rob had a funny story about many years back. The customer was actually so surprised that the pizza was delivered so fast. They called back; they thought it was frozen, and we invited the customer to come back to the store and to make sure and to try our pizza and just watch in front of us how we made the pizza fresh. And they were very surprised. Of course, Domino's pizza is fresh, arrives fresh, made fresh.
So its quality assurance is a huge factor.
Oh yeah, it's very big. We do random inspections. In fact, Domino's Pizza has their business consultant come in and do inspections across the board to make sure that product's quality is met. And also, I myself in my stores, I also randomly do customer inspections and also store inspections to make sure the product is always where it should be.
Now, it sounds like, Jesse, that you're really focused on the customer side of it, the sales side of it. Rob, you mentioned earlier you were more on the administrative side of it. You guys certainly have different roles, and as partners in these two franchises, do you guys overlap? How did you select your roles?
That was just more of a natural progression kind of thing. As Jesse was saying, he's very customer oriented. So am I. But I mean, that's just Jesse's specialty. I mean, he's actually in addition to the manuals provided by Domino's, he's even made his own training materials to help out. Myself, I focus more on the paperwork and the payroll, a bit of the accounting, and things of that nature.
And when it comes to decision making, I mean, are you guys always on the same page, or do you kind of clash from time to time? You've been friends for a long time, so I'm wondering how that works within business.
Oh, most of the time we're pretty easygoing, both of us, so it's not very hard for us to agree on decisions. Once in a while, we may have disagreements, but as I said, we discuss it a little bit, and one of us lets it go, and we just come to a conclusion.
So it's never come up to fisticuff or blows or anything of that nature.
Not yet, but there's still time.
No pizza throwing in the face or anything like that.
Nothing like that.
You touched a little bit on quality assurance and excellence. So there's got to be a marketing aspect. You got to make sure that the people out there know it. I mean, you invited one customer back to the store, but there's got to be other ways or certain marketing efforts that you must have done to make sure that the name is out there and it's really quality. Talk to us a little bit about how you've been able to take that marketing in your local market and make it yours.
Well, we do a lot of local flyering, that we make our own flyers. I mean, Domino's Canada provides us with a national program of flyers. We as well make our own local flyering. We also have a lot of community involvement. We are involved with sports, hockey, soccer, local teams, and as well as schools. And in the summer times, we have camp tours. We have scouts come and they make their own pizzas and things like that. So it's very important to have a lot of community involvement.
Today's Entrepreneur continues, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Our guests this evening, Rob Lekurnik and Jesse Goodwin, owners of two Domino's franchises. More in a moment. It's 8:23 on CJAD.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
824 on CJD. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau. Our guests this evening, Rob Lekrinick and Jesse Goodwin, owners of 2 Domino's franchises. And in a moment, we'll talk about HR with Micheline Mayette. But first, we continue on with Rob and Jesse.
You know, they've had a number of years' experience along the way, and we're hearing some interesting stories. But I'm very curious to know that along the way, since you've started in 1997, I believe is the year,
Right.
have you kind of looked back and said, you know what? If I had done something a little differently, I think I made this mistake. If I'd done it a little differently, I reached a fork in the road, that I would have done this, I would have gone left instead of right. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind with a mistake you made you would have done differently?
Well, one aspect would be when we first opened the store, we printed out too many menus. And we printed too many menus, and we actually changed our prices a couple of months later, so we couldn't really use them. So that was a bit of an expenditure that we didn't need.
Are you, you're very people-oriented, certainly, in customer service and quality, and I'm sure that Domino's places X amount of a whole rule book in front of you, if you will. But is there something that you've either wanted to change along the way, or you've been able to instill or deal with your people that have kind of enhanced your business and really have people keep coming back at the door?
Oh, one of the big things, of course, as I mentioned before, is customer service. I think any business to strive and to thrive is to have great customer service and have great marketing. And if you combine those two properly, I think you'll have a great success.
Do you have a good either mentor or peer group that you guys kind of bounce ideas off of that help you go along the way?
Well, we meet a lot with other Domino's franchisees, and we bounce ideas off each other, and we come together as a team a lot of times, and we actually do marketing as well as a team. A lot of times in the past we've done that, whether it be billboards or flyers or radio.
Is it a large group in Quebec that kind of gets together, or is it really a focus on the Montreal region?
It's more in the Montreal region, because most of the stores in Quebec are actually in the Montreal area.
Do you see yourselves as competitors with these other Domino franchises, or do you really work together as a team?
No, we work together. That's the beauty of this system, is that we each have our individual territories, and we don't compete with one another. We work together as a team.
You know, I'm thinking that, as the evening goes on, and I haven't had dinner yet, and as we're on the air, I'm staring at the computer screen saying, is online business, is online ordering becoming a little more prevalent, a little more important? How is that affecting your business, the online ordering, and is that set up already at Domino's?
Yes, the online ordering is already set up, and it's working quite well. The online ordering frequency is increasing every week, and it's adding to our total orders and our order frequency and our average ticket per order. So it's really going well, and we're promoting it with proper marketing, flyers and radio and things of that nature.
And is it a system? I mean, is it fully automated that there's really nothing that gone wrong that you kind of monitor as you go along?
Well, it seems, it's working well. I mean, people simply just type in their address, and it'll direct them to the proper store in their area. They can pay by credit card online. So the only communication they have, really, they don't have to call a store, is with the driver when the driver delivers the pizza. So it definitely simplifies things for people who are busy and don't have time to pick up the phone.
You say drivers. Let's talk a little bit about the drivers. Now, I'm sure they come from all walks of life, and they're very dedicated. Is it easy to find drivers? Are they, dedicated to the customer service? Because you're like the turnover. Talk to us a little bit about those either part-time or full-time people that are on the roads delivering your product.
Well, like you said, the delivery drivers, they come from all over, and they're quite dedicated. It's really a mix of part-time, full-time students, things like that. And we instill the same things in them as we do in our kitchen staff as well. Motivate them, try and get them to get to the people's house fast, not by driving fast, but by moving fast on their feet.
Do you guys still drive, or you've hung up your keys?
I've still drive once in a while, actually. If I come to the store in the afternoon and it's busy and we're short-staffed a little bit, I'll get on the road out there and visit my customers and make sure the customer's happy, wowed, and with a fast product, hot product. So I like driving still.
Part of what you keep, I guess, is quality control.
Exactly. I can go to the customers and talk to them and make sure they're happy and wow them with great customer service.
I think with certainly so many employee issues, and there's turnover and there's people that kind of take over what the entrepreneur does. There's really so many aspects that the entrepreneur has to be aware of. And I think after the breakdown, we'll really touch upon the human resource aspect side with whatever turnover in generations, because you said, Rob, that there was youth in the business, and sometimes it's different to deal with them versus some of the older generation.
Rob Lakernick and Jesse Goodwin from the local Domino's franchises, thanks so much for joining us this evening, guys.
Thank you for having us.
And coming up next, we'll tackle those HR issues with Micheline Mayette of Fuller Landau. So if you have any questions about HR issues for your business, small, medium business, sized businesses rather, you can always give us a call, and the team here at Fuller Landau can help guide you. 514-790-0991 and Star Talk. That's star 8255 on Bell Mobility. 8:30 right now on CJD.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
8:32 on CJD. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. And Josh Miller with me from Fuller Landau to talk about HR issues. Also from Fuller Landau is Micheline Mayette. Welcome back, Micheline.
Hi, good day.
So we were talking about our Domino's franchisees, Rob Lakernick and Jesse Goodwin, and some of the issues that they face when it comes to HR. Certainly high turnover rate, a lot of students working in these places. Micheline, how do you deal with HR issues when you have businesses that have such a high turnover?
I would say the restaurant industry is definitely an industry where there is generally a very high turnover. I would say that and the retail industry are probably the industries with the highest turnover. The number one thing that I usually recommend companies to do is to find out why employees are leaving. That's the number one thing, really. So I always recommend the companies do exit interviews. I find that's the best tool to know why are people leaving. Sometimes, especially in smaller businesses, people tend to take it very personally when they have people that are leaving. So sometimes they don't even want to ask the question, they're just upset. But really it's best to find out, put your pride aside, find out why they're leaving, find out what you can do better next time to make sure that your staff stays with you.
Do you think that entrepreneurs would recognize that there's a common theme somewhere, and when they hear it once or twice, might actually open their eyes a little bit?
It's difficult when you have a smaller staff. So when you have 10 or 20 people, then there's not always a common theme that's as easy to identify. But it's good to be aware of some of the issues of why people left, so next time you can watch out for those things in particular.
Now, what about the people that you kind of want to have them leave, but they don't? They kind of stick around a little too long, and certainly, we've all lived that scenario. I'm sure the guys at Domino's have in their past life lived that scenario too. What should an entrepreneur do to kind of facilitate that departure?
Well, there's two different types of turnover. There's the voluntary turnover and the involuntary turnover. So in this case, we're kind of talking about involuntary turnover that's not really happening where
Right.
you want it to happen. The best thing to do, especially if you have a smaller staff, it's very important that everybody's contributing within your business. So it's really important to follow up with employees, make sure you give them the feedback that's necessary. If there's any issues, make sure to document them properly in the employee's file so that if ever you do make the decision to terminate the employment, that you do have a well-documented file and you don't have any legal issues afterwards.
Now, these verbal discussions, like what if there's, the entrepreneur or the employer is just talking to the employee and saying, well, you did that right, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, and it's all verbal.
Yeah.
How do they put it to paper? How do they try to formalize it without putting the employees, on their back or up against the wall and kind of threatening them at the same time?
I'd say this is a pretty common fault among entrepreneurs is they like to keep things very informal. And so when it comes to giving feedback, yes, the first time, your employee doesn't cook their pizza properly, then it's okay to just tell them, you didn't do it properly, this is how you do it. It doesn't have to be super formal at the beginning. But when it's the second time that you're telling them, then it's a good idea to note in the file that you're giving them a verbal warning, let the employee know, document it. And then if there's any further incidences, again, to make sure that you actually are more formal about it and actually give them a written letter that can be documented in the file. But most entrepreneurs, I would say, don't do this. And then they end up regretting it after if the case goes to court, and it's very expensive. So I don't think they always realize what the cost is down the road. And once they do, they tend to be much more careful after.
You mentioned having some of these warning notices on a file. How much paperwork do you have to accumulate if you're in the process of letting someone go? If you want to fire someone, how many warnings does it take usually?
There's no clear-cut number, unfortunately. It depends. Every situation is different. That's why it's a good idea to consult a labor lawyer if you do have this type of situation, especially if the employee's been with you for a while. There's a few different things to consider. Is the person pregnant when you're letting them go? For example, did they just announce that they're pregnant and then you decide to let them go? That would be obviously very bad. Has the employee been with you for 30 years? Has the person been with you for 2 weeks? It varies a lot based on the seniority, the type of position the person has. Is it a managerial position or is it a very entry-level position? So there's a lot of factors.
Well, so let's ask Rob or Jesse quickly, has there been an experience, like how do you deal with, termination of an employee or a little bit of turnover? Is there anything specific that you've learned along the years that you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's very important to communicate with the staff member and make sure that they know what's expected of them. Constant evaluation is very important, motivation, and I think just regular communication on a day-to-day basis is very important to make sure that the staff member is doing what they're expected to do.
Micheline, how important would you say are job descriptions for people?
Well, I think it's good to have a clear expectation of the position. So it can be a job description. When you talk about job descriptions to entrepreneurs, they really cringe and and they'll say, no, I really don't want to formalize what the person does because they have to do a bit of everything. It depends on the type of company. I think a great thing with a franchise is that you do have the head office kind of guiding you on how to manage your HR practices. So when you talk about performance evaluations, it's great that you'll do that type of practice because a lot of companies don't do it. And a lot of companies, even for the training, you were talking about that your employees all get customer service training at the beginning. That's one thing that companies tend to find is just obvious. So they hire people and they kind of expect that they'll know how to do it and they'll never give them the training needed. And it'll backfire in the end. So for them it's obvious, but things aren't always obvious to everybody.
So Jesse certainly mentioned communication and you're talking about documentation. Really it's the lesson is, and you see it all the time, entrepreneurs, they run by the seat of their pants. They're trying to make a buck. They've got a great idea. They're going from one idea to another, yet they don't exactly write things down. They don't exactly send an email. They don't exactly create an employee file. And that, at the end of the day, can be their downfall. It's great when everything's working out perfectly, when the employee's working out really well. But when there's a little hint of, ooh, it's not working out that well, or, they're not treating the customer properly, now I got to find a way to let them go. And they've been with you for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. It becomes way more difficult to get rid of them. Are there specific things in let's say, if somebody were to keep an employee file actually in writing, would you suggest a certain list of things that they should maintain in there?
Really, they should keep anything that's relevant to the employee. They have to keep in mind an employee can have access to their own employee file at any time, so the employee should be aware of what's going in there in terms of documentation. Because it's private, confidential information, it should always be kept under lock and key and limited to access of only a certain number of people within the company. There's a lot of identity fraud, and in most cases, if people go to the police, they'll often ask, who keeps your personnel file at work? You should go find out if it's being kept in a secure location, because there's a lot of information in there that's very confidential.
We were also talking about generations before, and how, and I know, and we certainly dealt with so many different generations between the entrepreneurs that are here, and you got to approach them in different ways. We're talking about employee files and dealing with them, but even informally and formally. What have you seen, kind of with the younger versus older generation when you're dealing with the HR issues?
One thing that I would say, and again, it's generalizations, but I'd say it is a pretty common theme, is that they tend to be more outspoken and more confident maybe than previous generations. Part of it is, the theory behind it is that when parents were raising their children of that generation, there was a big movement among parents that they really want to build the confidence of their children, so they would ask their opinions a lot more. You see children are involved in decisions for purchasing cars, which are major decisions. And so they enter the workforce feeling that their opinion was very important and should be counted, which is great. A lot of them actually have very good ideas. And so I find the important thing in dealing with the new generation is to really go out and seek their opinion. Ask them, what do you think about this? What do you think we can improve? It's also a lot easier for the ego of the manager or entrepreneur to actually go out and ask the question than to be told, I don't think you're doing this right.
Sometimes when there's a new generation coming in, perhaps a son or daughter, they come into the business and all the old rules go out the window. And there's a new set of rules, new guidelines. What kind of, protections can both employers and employees have to make sure that everyone gets along under these new systems?
The most important thing is really to communicate changes, why they're happening. And this really goes for any situation where you're putting changes in place in a company. Get buy-in of the employees as much as possible before the changes are made. I mean, sometimes you see the new generation come into a company and it can be the son or daughter who went to business school and who never really worked very much, and so they come in and think they have all these great ideas that maybe aren't practical. In other cases, you have children who've worked in the company for a long time but have never really had the input because their mother or father was really running the business, and so when they came in, the ideas they have could be much more practical because they actually have the experience. But in any case, whenever you're making a change, it's really important to communicate it in advance, give people time to absorb it before making the change if possible.
Rob, Jesse, you're dealing with some part-time people, drivers, you're dealing with some management. You've certainly seen the different generations within your own business. How would you describe the differences, or what differences do you see between them?
Well, I would say technology is the biggest change. I mean, being with the internet nowadays, as opposed to when we started, it wasn't as nearly the same thing. People were more hands-on, manually just counting cash, for example, is more of a problem today than it was back in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
We have people who, they can work on a cell phone, no problem, and Twitter and Facebook, but when it comes to counting cash, they have a lot of problems nowadays, as opposed to back in when we first started.
Is there, I don't know, Jesse, if you've had a different experience or not? Can you talk a little bit about do they work a little differently? Is their ethic a little different? Do they think a little differently? Rob was mentioning, they don't count anymore. They have to do it on their BlackBerry or their iPhone. So I'm just curious to know, and anybody can pipe in at the moment, where they kind of see these generational differences in that respect.
Well, like Rob was saying, it's a lot of it has to do with the work ethic and just the maybe the alertness of it all. A little bit the generations maybe 10, 15 years ago, they seemed a little bit more they could multitask, and nowadays it's becoming maybe a little more increasingly difficult for them, let's say, to focus on a particular task.
So they're so used to, multitasking. 'Cause right now they tend to multitask a lot on the computer, but I guess sometimes they're so distracted by all the different technology that surrounds them that they have trouble focusing on one specific task at a time.
Exactly.
I think, when we're talking about people, we're kind of, what we're missing to talk about is key people that are there to really try and look after the business, a right-hand person of the entrepreneur, and that's something that I think must be really difficult to find, and if you find it, you really want to keep that person. So I think when we get back from the break, we can talk about really finding that key employee and what we can do to keep them, motivate them, and why they should be there to begin with.
Today's Entrepreneur on a CJAD continues after the break, 8:45.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. We're dealing with HR issues now. In studio, Michel Mayette of Fuller Landau, and of course Josh Miller, our co-host, and also Rob and Jesse from Domino's. They are two Domino's franchise owners. And guys, we're talking about key people in the system. Do you have any thoughts on that? How do you keep certain key people within your organization to make sure that maybe all the burden doesn't fall on your shoulders?
Well, I would say motivation is number one. You have to keep them motivated. Incentives.
Such as?
Well, we also have a bonus system set up, of course. That's always
Okay.
one big incentive.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Money works.
Yeah.
Not always pizza, but money.
Right. And Jesse, you have anything?
Also, you have to train the team member as well to make sure, obviously, that they feel important and you have to give them also the proper leeway so that they can handle things on their own and find solutions and make sure that they feel fulfilled at their job. That's one of the most important things as well.
Now, there must have been a point. I mean, when you guys started out, it was really the two of you. You were, for want of a better term, chief cook and bottle washer, as it may apply more specifically. There must have been a point where you said, you know what, I just, it's not, I'm the entrepreneur. I'm trying to run a business. It shouldn't be me flipping the pieces. It shouldn't be me delivering. It shouldn't be me doing some of the more menial tasks. At what stage did you get there? Was there a light bulb that went off in your head? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Well, I think that came when we opened our second location in 2001. We realized it's time to kind of let go a little bit and put our faith in, good managers that we had at the time, and we still have today, of course. And we just went from there. And
remember the first time actually that we left the restaurant and let somebody else in charge. It was really difficult the first night. I remember we went out for dinner and we were wondering what was happening in the store and just wondering what was going on, if everything was being taken care of the way it should be. And that was a hard night. But after that, we let other people be in charge, and you have to go with it.
So you're saying control is really difficult for an entrepreneur to give up, at least at first.
At first, it's very, very, very hard.
Yeah, it's quite hard.
And how about today? You're 13 years in, and you have people there. Do you still feel that you're kind of pulled back a little bit, that control, or have you learned to really let go and have a bit more of a vision?
I've learned to let go myself and have more of a vision. You have no choice, especially when you have a couple locations. However, I still get my hands dirty in the restaurant business still and make sure that things are taken care of because, after all, I still enjoy it a lot. I love serving customers. I like making pizzas.
The topic of delegation to me, Josh, is an interesting one because it's been said that the key to success is delegation. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs who like you said, are afraid to share the responsibility, afraid to delegate?
If you keep doing it yourself, and you see it amongst entrepreneurs all the time, they get at the beginning, they're the ones that have the ideas, they're the ones that really want to make everything happen, and they're the ones that they believe they're the only ones that can make it happen. But what differentiates between the true entrepreneurs, that entrepreneur house has vision. And that vision can't have that person doing all the time. The quality and some of the characteristics of the best entrepreneurs is they have vision and they have ideas, and they should be generating those ideas and finding the next best thing, looking 2, 3, 5, 10 years out. And to do that, the only way they can do that is to get away, step away from the actual actions, step away from the doing, and have somebody in there that they can delegate to. Even if that person only does 80% as well as you can do it, you're still going to be, time and time again, you see that the entrepreneur is still going to be much better off because they can devote their energy somewhere else. Is that opportunity cost? And that's where the success gets driven from. And we're talking about, as we bring it back to key employees, because that's really where the entrepreneur is going to drive his success, having the key people. We were talking, Dan, you asked a question about bonus systems or what the incentive programs. Maybe I can ask Micheline what she's seen over the years as far as how do you incentivize people? How do you kind of leave that carrot or that pizza kind of hanging in front of them for them to catch?
There definitely has to be some kind of incentive to perform well. It could be in the form of a bonus or other types of remuneration or something. Sometimes you get complaints because if you, let's say, have a performance valuation system and every year the employee scores amazing, you tell them that they're your top employee, but they're getting the same increase and same pay as everybody else, it can be a little demoralizing. If you have a very strict system in place and there's no way to give something extra, you can always find something usually more informal, even if it's a day off or just a way to thank the employee. Because yes, you can say thank you, and that does go a long way, but there is a limit to how far that goes. So it is important to make people know that their efforts are going to be rewarded at the end of the line.
Is it also like, I know it's there's always a two-way street. So not everything drives the same employee. Not every incentive will drive different people the same way. So it's really kind of getting a little bit into the head of your key people. Would you suggest even sitting down with them to ask them what challenges them and what drives them?
Well, I think communication is key. And yes, you can definitely ask the employee, what do you want? Do you prefer having time off because you have young children, or do you prefer the bonus, or I think it is a good idea to ask them to get their input. It's not as easy to do the bigger the company gets, but when you're smaller and you only have a few people to manage, then yes, I think it is great to be flexible. I think that's one of the advantages that entrepreneurs and small, medium-sized businesses have over the bigger companies that aren't as flexible with the employees.
Today's Entrepreneur continues on CJAD. It's 8:53.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
8:54 on CJAD. Last moments of today's Entrepreneur with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. Our guests are Rob Lekarnik and Jesse Goodwin, owners of 2 Domino's franchises. Also in studio, Micheline Mayette, the HR person over at Fuller Landau. Josh.
We were talking earlier. I mean, we had a whole bunch of topics, and one thing, they're Domino's franchisees, and I'm really curious to know if somebody was to start a franchisee today, what advice would you give them? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that they should look for?
Well, one thing I've learned over time is that a lot of common misconception is that a lot of people feel that if you're managing an operation or a business, that you think it's the same thing as owning it. And I myself actually fell for that originally. I was managing a store for a while, and I figured, hey, I'm doing this, I might as well just own one at this point. But the truth is there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. There's a lot more business end. There's a lot, as well. Another misconception that people have is they think that owning a franchise is an easy thing, and it's just a turnkey operation, and you walk in and everything's set up for you. It's not always the case. There's still a lot of work to be done before, during, and after it's built.
Is there? I mean, but they give you kind of a playbook to go by. Is that how it works? Like when you first get started, is like, here, we've accepted you. Is it difficult to get a franchise? Do you have to follow certain criteria?
Yes, you have to be a manager of a Domino's franchise for a year, or you have to, go through a strict training program to make sure that you know how to handle the standards and to make sure everything's perfect, of course. Aside from that, it could be pretty difficult.
Is there, again, I come back to this playbook that I believe they want the franchisees to kind of follow certain rules, regulations, product, and all that jazz. Do you work directly from that? Do you kind of create your own after that? Like, what if somebody were to get into that, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, especially if they want to get into a franchise, I'd tell them that you can do anything that you put your mind to it, as long as you follow the system and as long as you're customer oriented. And
there are checks. I guess the franchisor does come every now and then, periodically, and I guess check up on the system, the processes, the owners. Is that very involved? Do you look forward to that and their input? Do you tell us a little bit about their visits?
Well, Domino's Pizza has a great support system. They come frequently to the stores to make sure everything's being taken care of properly, and that's very important and comforting, actually.
As in, you kind of can bounce ideas off of them as well?
Yes, they actually have a lot of ideas themselves, and but they also give us a lot of leeway, initiative that we can do ourselves.
Now, what's next? I mean, are you guys satisfied as entrepreneurs? Are you satisfied with the 2 locations? Like, what's beyond this? Do you look beyond this this part of your life? Like, where's the next steps for you?
Well, the next step for us is we're considering now opening a 3rd location this year. We're actually currently looking for locations right now and areas, and we hope to keep growing from there.
And if you had to give any advice to today's entrepreneur, stuff that either keeps you up at night or not, what one piece of advice would you give today's entrepreneur?
Well, I would say not to think about business when you're going to sleep.
Can you really leave it? Can you really leave it at the office?
Yes, I've been able to do that now. I used to have a harder time when I was younger. However, after having some panic problems at nighttime, now I can leave it at the office and I sleep very peacefully.
And Rob, do you have anything, any words of wisdom that you would offer to today's entrepreneur?
Well, similar to what Jesse said before, that if you have if you follow the plan, if you have a well-organized system, and you strictly adhere to it, you should be successful, as long as you follow the plan that's before you.
Well, thanks very much, guys. Certainly gained a little bit of insight into some Domino's franchise, the entrepreneur. I think what sticks out with me is that, it's a moving target. But delegation, as Dan said before, if entrepreneurs, when they start out, they will roll up their sleeves, they really get into it. That's something, and that control is really difficult to give up. But I think the true entrepreneur, the one that's really going to gain the big success, more dollars in his pocket, bigger ambition, is the one that is able to find the key people to pass off the train, to pass off that information, and to truly make the best of their vision going forward. It's only when you really can create the right team around you, the right-hand person, the left-hand person, that an entrepreneur can really take that vision and make it as much as they can looking down the road.
Thank you, Rob and Jesse, and thank you as well to Michel Mayette of Fuller Landau. You can reach Fuller Landau during business hours at 514-875-2865 or visit their website, www.flmontreal.com. Today's Entrepreneur returns next week at 8 p.m. Thanks again, Josh.
Dan, it was a great start to the year. Next week, we're going to have a great show with Nutrasoya. The owner of Nutrasoya is going to come and tell us about how he built that brand and import-export.
Excellent. So again, Fuller Landau, flmontreal.com. This has been today's Entrepreneur on CJAD. Delmar at Night is next.
The opinions of the commentator or commentators are solely those of the commentators and not of CJAD 800 or Astral.